Wanted, young men to rebuild Western civilization. Must be unafraid of pain, blisters, intellectual rigor, and a lifetime of long shifts with swords and shovels, digging ditches, repelling invaders, and reading stacks of books taller than their fathers. Must be impervious to manipulative women of all sorts, giggling virgins, cyber skanks, and even full cauldrons of Karens or hand-wringing clergy, but always seeking to hear and heed the words of Lady Wisdom. Immune to the leadership of hypocrites and LARPing online masculinitods, unaffected by abusive authorities, petty professors, and all brokers of official respectability. Willing to hoist the Jolly Roger and Johnny Cash's favorite finger whenever faced with idolatry. Long-suffering joy and determination required. Must be willing to dwell among the tombs and graves of the long dead, seeking truths that cannot die. Exhaustion guaranteed. Conflict guaranteed. Mortality guaranteed. New St. Andrews College. Liberal arts for the undaunted.
America is a country that was founded for the purpose of allowing Christians to do their duty before God and not to have their consciences ruled by the doctrines and commandments of men. Reese Fund exists in order to cite not just as a plaque on the wall, but to actually be used in business as though they're commandments from God that we're supposed to obey. Our goal is to find businesses and to buy them and to build them up. We want to find manufacturing businesses and use them to make sure that we can maintain our capacity to do things here. Reese Fund, Christian capital, boldly deployed.
Psalm 124.
Maintain.
It's Beer and Psalms Wednesday, and we're live on Cross Politics with Pastor Toby, Chuck Knox, me, and my wife. My wife's joining us today.
Where's my wife?
This is not the Christmas show.
I know. Where's Mrs. Shannon?
Say, get on over here. We have to do a show.
Hustle up, baby.
Why are you so special bringing your wife to the show?
You know, because we're going to talk about the Tucker Carlson, Cassie show.
Oh, my wife would love to talk about that show.
Love that.
Oh, because we watched that show together.
Did you?
No,
yes,
my wife
messed up.
never wants to be on this show.
That's true. You're welcome, Jenny.
Well, I say my wife going on water break is she's getting in the groove.
She's getting used to it.
Yeah.
I am. I can put these things in pretty fast.
She can put her ears in and everything.
Because it was hard, wasn't it, Neil? For a while.
All right. Hey, guys. So every year for Prodigal America, for our Fight Laugh Feast conference, which is actually in October, go to prodigalamerica.com to sign up because you should be there in October.
Totally.
Every year we do kind of a singles mixer. We've been doing that since 2020, the first year.
Okay.
We did our conference in 2020. We did a singles mixer, and it was kind of on the fly because I actually had a bunch of people come up to me in 2020 and say, "Hey, is there anything going on for singles? We'd love to meet each other at your conference."
Okay.
And I watched a lot of other conferences start doing that too. I'm so happy that they're starting to do
that.
It's
great.
Yeah.
It's spreading. The singles mixer is spreading.
And
we're gonna get some baptized babies around here.
I think I had my mom or maybe Chelsea. I was like, go find a place that I can announce and everything. And there's that bowling ring. It's the only bowling ring that was open in 2020 in Franklin, Tennessee. Anyway,
yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
So since then, we've had couples meet at our singles mixer.
Okay.
Probably every year. I can't confirm that because I can't remember back in 2021 if that happened. We've had couples meet there and get married.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Same day?
Singles maker, not the same day.
Oh wow!
But Toby would marry him the next day.
At the bowling alley.
We call it speed courtship.
Yeah, you've got 24 hours to make a decision. Go.
No.
So, anyways, this last conference was in Kentucky. I can't even remember where it's at now. At this point.
Ark Encounter.
And they've invited us. They said, I wanted to give you an honorary invitation to our wedding this year because we met at your Fight Laugh Feast singles mixer last year.
God.
And so if we can make it to Kansas August 31st, which was last week.
Oh, man.
Gabe.
They just sent it to us. It's an honorary invitation is what it was. They're very sweet, very kind.
Last week.
Again, we don't announce the singles mixer at our conference. You don't know when it's going to be, what night it's going to be, anything, because we don't want the weirdos showing up. We want the good guys and girls showing up to the singles mixer.
we do announce it at the conference.
We do announce it at the conference and all that stuff. So you got to show up.
So if you're really weird and you sign up for the conference, you can find out about the singles mixer.
Right.
Shoot.
There's a way in.
Yeah.
Business owners, is your company struggling to grow? What if I told you that the right employee could grow your business by 5, 10, or even 25%? You would be crazy not to take that deal, right? That's exactly what redballoon.work offers. Red Balloon Recruiter in particular. Our personalized source and screen process connects you with top talent, increasing revenue and reducing costs. Visit redballoon.work today and transform your hiring. All right, guys, you listen to Cross Politic because you take the Dominion mandate seriously. Unsurprisingly, so does Dominion Wealth Strategists. They will help you build a multi-generational legacy with holistic financial strategies that include budgeting, insurance, debt management, retirement planning, estate planning, and more. Dominion Wealth leverages all corners of the financial services industry as independent brokerage agents, matching you with suitable products and services from dozens of top industry service providers. They educate, advise, and build plans to reduce your donation to Caesar and maximize your gift to God, no matter your tax bracket. They have solutions for every fiscal stage of life and for your children. If you and your spouse want to take dominion over your finances, book a complimentary consultation at www.reformed.money. That's reformed.money today. From baptism to burial, Dominion has you covered. Once again, that's reformed.money to book a complimentary consultation.
I'm telling you that Red Balloon ad is actually really important for us right now because our lead producer is leaving.
Oh,
going down to Boise.
Yes.
Have I told you this, Toby? Did I tell you Neil's leaving?
You sent me a text.
I sent you a text.
Yeah.
Because you guys never do business meetings with me anymore.
I'm glad you didn't tell me live on air.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
What happened?
But also I'm working on kind of a journalism network, working with a couple companies actually that are joining us on this. We're creating basically a journalist network for all 50 states. If you guys want to email me, waterboy@crosspolitic.com, would love for you guys to do that.
Is Jason Whitlock and Megan coming on?
There's some interesting potential partnerships.
I'm just wondering because,
Anyways, we're looking for journalists.
They're our
Email
favorite
me.
journalists. They're our
waterboy@crosspolitic.com. We got some really cool things I've been working on with some
I think
Philip, our boy Philip from Virginia. I'm not gonna say his last name. He stayed at your house when his plane got canceled.
Oh, right. Yes. Totally remember that.
Tommy's like, no, Philip doesn't ring a bell. Virginia, still doesn't ring a bell. Oh, his plane got canceled.
Yeah, stayed at my house. Remember that. Yeah. Hi, Philip.
Yeah.
I think the Jason and Megan are like our honorary senior news correspondents. What's his name is our honorary senior legal advisor.
Davis Younts.
Yeah,
What's his name? What's his name? He's come on 20 times.
Apparently, I can't remember anybody's names.
It's been a long week.
Long day pastor.
Yeah, it has been.
So last week, water break, we actually covered a little bit of the Callie Casey interview on Tucker Carlson. Callie Casey. I had the same problem at water break.
It's hard.
So we take kind of a little more health perspective on that water break. So check that out. Go to our YouTube channel. It's I think it's youtube.com/Gabe Rench or something like that. But Google water break and you'll get there. It used to say /water break, and our lead producer that's leaving changed it.
Oh, good thing he's leaving.
That's a good thing. Hey, girls, and he's still single. So.
Oh yeah.
But the Callie Casey interview on Tucker was pretty, I think, significant for me because Annie, for several years, had kind of been talking about our food. Our food is kind of increasing in toxicity over the years. And then you think about just the broader health of the American culture. I mean, obesity wasn't even a thing until the 70s. There was no such thing as childhood obesity. I mean, statistically, it was nothing. 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, stuff like that. You have, diabetes is becoming a bigger thing. Cancer is becoming a bigger thing. And so
especially in the younger folks, cancer is huge right now.
Yeah. Well, that's probably because they got the COVID vax. I don't know. Right. There's just, and you can't there's seemingly correlations here. And some of those correlations seem very strong in all this. So the conversation, I think, is I'm glad. I feel like this Callie Casey interview opened up a lot of conversations around this. But really, what really tripped me out about their interview was not the the toxicity stuff that Annie had been talking about, the seed oils and just other things that's been going on, but was like the connection between like the cigarette industry, big food industry, big medical industry, and big government, and how they brought the receipts for that.
Yeah,
because Callie, he was a
lobbyist.
He's a lobbyist, yeah.
lobbyist,
Yeah.
and then Casey was a trained medical doctor at
He's a doctor,
Stanford.
9 years.
It wasn't just
Nice.
any kind of lobbyist. He was going with
He was
the
with, like Coca-Cola.
Yeah, he was after all the food industry. That's
Yeah.
where he was a lobbyist in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's like, I think he said something in the show. By the way, I think that interview with Tucker is probably the most important show Tucker's done, as far as just groundbreaking. It's just groundbreaking in every way.
Yeah.
And so everybody needs to go watch
I still
that
think
show.
Doug Wilson is more important.
Well, that
Groundbreaking.
one wasn't actually live or posted. That was actually behind a paywall. So
No, it became live.
He was
All-
live.
Did they
all their
do it live?
interviews first going behind
Oh,
the
okay.
firewall.
I didn't see
and-
his go live.
They-
Okay.
yeah.
I was
Yeah.
behind the firewall because as soon as Tucker came out, I was like, we getting that membership. So I saw it. So I never saw it.
No,
But
they eventually all come public.
Yeah.
his
So
interviews.
this is like parallel with that one, and, you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, if everybody needs to go and find that show and
Yeah.
dedicate 2 hours and just
Yeah.
watch it. It is a
Listen to it.
detox in and of itself.
Yeah. Because the receipts are important. Well, I'm gonna so we've already kind of introduced Casey to you because she's pretty prominent in these clips that we're gonna be showing. But she walked away from she was 9 years in the medical industry,
Right.
30 years old, was doing surgeries, scalpel, all that stuff, and kept getting these patients back and kept seeing patients who had weird things that she had to go do surgical removal of or whatever. And she's like, there's something wrong here. I'm dealing with these patients, and when I deal with the patient, it's at the point of the knife.
Mhm.
And there has to be something going on before that for them to get here, and I got to cut them up now, or or do surgery on them. And so she's like, I'm done. I'm going to go back and figure out what are the root causes that are driving this surgical industry that I'm in. So that's kind of her background. So she kind of had this wake up red pill moment regarding surgery. And so that's so she's basically spent the last, I think, 5-6 years of her life. Maybe you might know more than this.
9 years.
Last 9 years, because she's like 38.
Oh, you mean
39
now?
or something.
Sorry,
That's
I
right.
don't know. I don't.
Since she's 30 years old, since she dropped down the scaffold,
Yeah, I
it's
don't
been
know.
like 5, 6, maybe 8
It's hard
years
to
or
say.
something.
Yeah, working on this book and
And what's her book that she wrote?
Good
called Good Energy.
Good
Yeah,
Energy.
It's a good read.
And so she spent the last 5, 6, 7 years trying to figure out the root cause of what gets patients to this point of having 5 medications or surgery or whatever.
Or in her mom's case, death, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that was
Big
very
part of
So
the
big,
that's a
story.
big part of her story. Is
Yeah.
her mom had cancer and died,
Yeah.
and a lot of other sort of complicating
Mhm.
factors. And then the other thing she talks a lot about was how she noticed in the medical profession how all the incentives are sort of pressure, maybe unspoken assumptions, or what was always to sort of medicate and surgery.
Mhm.
Right. Pharmacology.
Yeah, and very little on like diet
Food
and lifestyle
Yeah.
questions.
She even made-
Prevention.
Yeah,
Yeah.
prevention. Like, so how
Yeah.
did we get here? And it's sort of this, there's like a pressure that she was feeling in the industry.
to only do pharmaceuticals and surgery.
Yeah. And I would say, and the thing about the interview that really caught my attention was how they tied this right into the COVID thing. Because
Yeah.
I think for
The pressure for masking and
yeah,
social
yeah,
distancing.
exactly.
And,
So all this, like, when somebody says there's pressure, I think maybe 5 years ago, a lot of us would have had a hard time like being like, well, I mean, I know like sometimes, maybe if your baby's born in the hospital, you might want to, pay attention to which vaccines they're giving them and when and that kind of thing. And you have to, stand up for what you believe in and that kind of thing. So I know there's been some of that in some hospitals. I've heard horror stories or, or worse than others. But I think after COVID, all of a sudden people are like, oh,
Yeah.
You mean like, if you don't mask up, you don't love your neighbor. If you don't
Yeah.
get the jab, you don't love your neighbor.
If
don't-
your 0-year-old doesn't get the vaccine,
if you don't get the second and the third and the fourth
Yeah.
boosters, you don't love your neighbor. You're some kind of wacko. You're a threat to society.
Yeah.
That kind of pressure that big pharma can bring through the government, and they're saying that's what we've seen in the industry
Yeah.
with regard to medicate.
Yeah.
And it's just treating symptoms.
Yeah.
And let's do a surgery. And the fact that she points out that those also are all big money makers.
yeah, highly incentivized surgery.
Yeah, it's like this is where the money comes from, and this is where the hospitals get their money.
Yeah.
It's where the doctors get paid. And even if most doctors and nurses are trying to be good,
Yeah.
it's still perverse incentives built into the system of like,
Right.
and you're going to make more.
Yeah.
So I'm already actually going to call a video audible here
Yeah.
about their comments about Obamacare. What was because I think incentives in this are getting more and more perverse as the bigger government's gotten more and more involved.
Right.
And her Callie and Casey's comments on Obamacare kind of blew my mind.
When Obamacare was coming about, they were, which was really an utter failure. There was lip service that was paid to this idea of value-based care, okay, which sounds great on paper, right? So value is good outcomes over lower cost. Most of them were based on how many of their patients were medicated. So instead of a doctor having to report quality as, I have a patient who got better, who got healthier,
which we expect,
it was how much of the patient population was on long-term medication. So the actual good outcome was defined by medication adherence in a practice, rather than is the patient reversed of their disease. Every disease
So it wasn't the actual outcome.
It wasn't the outcome. The outcome ended up being how many of the patients took meds. So even with lip service to good outcomes, it's not a healthier cell, it's a medicated patient. Those are two different things.
It's amazing how much postmodernism ruins everything.
Yeah, right. What do you mean?
Well,
Explain
because outcome of what, and they can, if we can define that word now, what that actually means, then we don't actually have to pay attention to the real outcomes, right? And postmodernism just, we get to manipulate the ideas in terms of words.
What is good?
And we can define that how we want to.
Yeah.
And since we can define that how we want to, and those words really aren't attached to reality, then you can forget anything really mattering.
Yeah.
So when you look at the word outcome, and when they look at the word outcome, there's two different ideas that are working there.
Yeah.
And since they're the ones who are giving you the medicine, then they get to define what outcome is.
Well, and Callie later, talking about Obamacare, says that Obamacare put the profit for insurance and capped it at 15%. So the only way insurance makes more money is if they charge the hospitals more.
Mm-hmm.
Because
it makes the price go up.
Right. And
What-
so if they only get revenue and profit off that 15%, well, what happens if you bill out $1 million and you can only get 15%?
Right.
What if you can get that billing up to $100 million?
Right.
And you get 15%.
So are you saying the idea to cap insulin prices is going to make it
more expensive?
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
so it's not a good idea to let the government be in control of pricing.
And the thing is, if you cap one product, let's say insulin, well, the other products are going to go up. That's just the nature of economics. So it's like, okay, yeah, you can cap that product, but we're just going to charge more over here.
You might get a short term lowering, but it's not going to last.
That's right. So and then they went on to talk about again. Sorry, Neil, I'm going to mess this all up for you because now I just went down a train of thought.
And you wonder why he's leaving.
Yeah, you wonder why our producer's leaving because he's lost a lot of hair since he's been here, and he's Asian. It's crazy. He's lost a lot of hair. Is the food industry in its connection to big cigarette?
Okay.
Like this is where, so like I said at the opening, like my wife had told me for years about kind of, hey, our food's getting more toxic, that kind of thing. But when it exposed to me, like all the kind of socialistic connections that have been going on for about 50 years in our food industry, I was like, oh, they don't have our best interest in mind. I kind of chalked up a lot of like seed oils being in our food for like, they're trying to make it cheaper. Hey, big farming has, driven up, product capacity and all this stuff.
Food is cheaper,
more
accessible.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
But when I started seeing the receipts of how they mapped out kind of the socialism for me in big food, so here's a video clip on their comments about kind of the food industry and its connection to big cigarette industry.
The food industry and the processed food industry was created by the cigarette industry. And I think this is very telling. It's something I learned. So in the 1990s, the two largest food companies in the world were R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris. What happened is when the Surgeon General way too late in the 1980s said cigarettes were maybe problematic, these were some of the largest companies in the world with the largest cash piles of any company in the world. So what they did is they used their cash piles to buy food companies. The two biggest M&A deals up until 1990 in world history were cigarette companies buying food companies. You had in the 90s, these two cigarette companies very strategically do two things. They shifted their thousands of scientists who were experts at making cigarettes addictive to the food department. So we had the rise of ultra-processed food where our food now is a science experiment. The second thing they did is they shifted their lobbying. So the cigarette industry, of course, was the biggest, lobbying spenders and had a good playbook. They shifted their playbook on lobbying and rigging institutions of trust to food. So they created the food pyramid.
food pyramid.
That's where we got the food.
So
That's where we
This is
go.
where we got what?
The food,
food
pyramid,
pyramid.
which he basically calls propaganda, which is interesting.
Wait,
when-
explain the
when
food pyramid.
did this come out? My wife was telling me about this, and I didn't go to public school, and we didn't talk about it.
Oh,
I
man.
don't know anything about.
I think this came out in the 80s.
Yeah, I remember seeing this in
Yeah.
class.
Wait.
Yeah. Well, what?
Explain the problem with it.
Oh, well, I mean, it makes even more sense when you listen to kind of the backstory of what Casey, right? Callie, what he just said. But basically, when you have all these big cereal companies that are,
and bread and grain.
Exactly. So the word on the street was, hey, let's go ahead and put a pyramid out that tells everybody. And just keep in mind, people aren't eating like, they're not milling flour at home. They're not eating like beans and like whole good grain, like good carbs. Like there is such thing as that, but that's not what's getting pushed. These are like refined cereals. It's huge.
Processed cereals.
Cereal was huge.
But who paid for this? How did this get there?
Well, big food. I mean, they're all in bed together. That's kind of his whole point. And it was a really brilliant move, like he said, where they took all of those scientists whose one job is to learn how to get people addicted to something. And they moved them from tobacco because that, the Surgeon General, finally came out and was like, it's bad for you. Yeah. So they just moved them over. And so you have these highly, highly processed, government subsidized foods that are highly, highly addictive and very hard to moderate. And then they come out with this propaganda like you need, 9 to 13 servings, some ridiculous number of these foods a day in order to be healthy. And this pyramid was on, you can find some doctors' offices even to this day. They still have this pyramid in their office.
This was the training on how you need to eat.
Yes.
Your
exactly.
intake of this.
Yes.
This is the largest.
So Big Cereal worked with the FDA to fund the food pyramid.
And you put,
they put you're supposed to have 30% of Big Cereal every day, basically.
And you put, that little healthy heart from the American Heart Association, you stamp that on anything.
Right.
Frosted Flakes, store-bought bread with 50 ingredients in it, and again, I'm not anti-carbohydrate at all, but that's not the kinds of things that these guys are selling.
That should be the foundation of your food.
The kinds of stuff people are eating. And you see all the saturated fat way up there, like way up high, like, bad for you.
But don't miss, and here's the thing that the connection for me here. Don't miss that the government first started regulating the cigarette industry and started putting the pinch on the cigarette industry. And the cigarette industry had a pile of cash because back in the 40s, 50s, it was a big heyday for cigarette industry. They had a pile of cash. And so they started getting the squeeze from the government. And then so they used that cash to go buy a lateral industry. Food, big cereal, big food, basically.
Oh,
and so they just retooled their scientists to, okay, how do you make food addictive? How do you get MSGs into food? How do you get, MSGs into your bag of chips and all that?
So I need to see is more like receipts on that particularly. But the regulation part is
he laid it out. He said the biggest purchases were from cigarette industry into the food industry.
Yes, but that doesn't prove that they were trying to make it addictive. He asserted that, but I haven't seen the receipts.
Fair enough.
But
have you eaten the food?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I stopped eating it when I want to.
Well, you're not like everybody else, obviously.
Yeah.
But
that's for sure.
But I do need some cereal.
All of a sudden, we started talking about it.
But the thing that I agree on is the government telling us what is good for us. I mean, is first of all, it's just unbiblical. It's not the government's job. I've said this before, but the government has been given, the civil government has been given the sword. They have a sword, and their job is to punish evildoers. Their job is not to do healthcare. Their job is not to do education. Their job is not to run the church. Their job is to punish evildoers. When you get them involved in healthcare, what you're asking for is somebody whose main job is to swing a sword around to help you with your healthcare. Which means it's going to be lethal. It just is. It's by God's design. That's what they're good at. In the Old Testament, empires and kingdoms are pictured as beasts.
That's right.
They're beasts that are,
and in Revelations.
Yes, and in Revelation. And Nebuchadnezzar, when he when he's not acknowledging God, he is a beast. There's always a little bit of a beastliness to every government this side of heaven. The best governments are more humane, but that means they fundamentally do justice and they punish evildoers. But I actually wanted to say this guy only goes to the 80s and 90s. I remember reading about this. This is actually in Gary DeMar's God and Government book. But in 1942, the Supreme Court case Wickard versus Filburn decided that it was illegal for a farmer to feed his own wheat,
Oh yeah.
Yes.
wheat that he grew on his own property. It was illegal for him to feed that wheat to his own farm animals.
Wow.
Do not muzzle the ox
Wow.
as it's treading
Why, do you know
out the
why?
grain.
What reason was
Yes. The argument was that since the Constitution allows the federal government to regulate
commerce clause.
interstate commerce,
Yeah.
which has been like the camel under the nose of the tent, and since the New Deal, signed by FDR,
Yes.
was regulating the supply and demand of wheat
Interesting.
via subsidies.
Yeah.
So when did we start subsidizing wheat?
1940s, 30s. Actually, it's 30s.
In the New Deal, FDR's
New
New Deal.
Yeah.
In the name of getting us out of the Great Depression, the
Right.
government starts pouring money to get farmers to grow wheat.
No, they first started in the name of the Great Depression to pay farmers to crush their wheat, to kill their crop.
Yeah.
Because demand was so high, no one could make money off farming, so they actually paid farmers to knock their wheat down.
Okay,
That's how it started.
Well, anyways, the New Deal was basically trying to control supply and demand, and so the argument was that since the New Deal was regulating supply and demand of wheat via subsidies, our nation's highest court decided that allowing one farmer to grow his own wheat and then feed it to his own cows
Wicked.
would mean that there was more supply and less demand because he wasn't buying it off the market according to the government-controlled subsidies on the open market.
You know, you wonder why all these Bible verses are there in the Old Testament.
Right.
People
Yeah.
just skip on right
But
over.
I'm Baptist. I don't believe in the Old Testament.
Yeah, we.
Just kidding, Darren. I hear you listening. I see you listening. Sorry, man.
But I think what I'm saying though is the government started getting involved in our food at least in the late 1930s, 1940s.
That's right.
Yeah.
With the supply and demand of wheat and back to the food pyramid thing.
Yeah.
It's like so they've already been messing with wheat and agriculture related to wheat for 80 years.
Yeah, right.
And so
At least.
and so when cigarettes come along and they want to regulate that and they want to get in bed with those grain industries that they've been heavily subsidizing.
Right.
I mean, there's already government hooks and all of that. And I think that was the big thing for me was like, that was the connection where I was like, they're subsidizing the corn and the grain and the seed oil, all this stuff.
Soy,
Like, and I'm a little bit more agnostic on exactly like what's good for you, what's not good for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I trust you. I mean, you
It's
do
fine.
good things, but like, I'm just naturally a little more skeptical, but I know that the socialism aspect is bad for us.
Yeah. It's sketchy.
And what they're, and if COVID is an example of what they do with their power, and it is, then I'm not at all surprised that them subsidizing grain, cereals, breads, whatever, to keep it superficially low priced,
Right.
and at least incentivize people to buy it, even if, I mean, maybe there's addictive chemicals too, but at the very least, it's like,
put it at the base of the pyramid.
It's cheaper and it's highly recommended that you eat a lot of cereal.
Yeah.
Right.
That works out real well.
It
for
does.
big cereal.
It's
But
suspicious.
don't forget, don't miss this. Callie said that he was referring to the cigarette industry, that the regulations came way too late. So he wanted big cigarette industry to get regulated.
Right.
And once he didn't understand the connection between regulating big cigarettes.
I don't know. Didn't he say the Surgeon General finally said something way too late?
Maybe.
Yes.
I think
Yes,
that's what he
it
said.
said.
I don't know if he's pro-regulation. I think he said in the past that he's just like, don't subsidize this
I don't
stuff.
think America should have a Surgeon General.
Yeah, I mean,
Right?
yeah, I mean,
That's a mama doctor. That's a mama role.
he was the one who said,
You know.
don't wear masks. And then he turned around and said,
He
wear
said,
a
wear a
mask.
mask.
It hasn't
right,
been good. But
Yeah.
just to be accurate, I think that's what he said.
that's helpful, baby.
I think that's what he said.
I'm just watching y'all. This is hilarious. I just watch y'all. Y'all look so good and just so next to each other, having a
so
good time.
cute.
Let's
Just
talk
so
about
cute.
health.
I miss
Who's
my
our
baby.
I want so there's a little balance here. So I want you to hear some of them and their balance. They aren't all just like extreme, in their comments. So this is I think Callie, maybe it's Casey, talking about the food industry is not trying to kill us. So they're trying to show some balance here.
This produces a lot of side effects to ourselves. The food industry isn't trying to kill Americans. They're trying to make food cheap and addictive. And what I learned, in the morning meeting with the food companies, trying to lobby and influence the USDA being the lifeblood of nutrition research, paying off, nutrition research at Harvard and Stanford as a junior employee, shocked by that.
So you saw that?
Oh, my first week, as working for these industries, it was a list of top professors. The food industry pays 11 times more for foundational nutrition research than the NIH. You go to any nutrition school in the country, the lifeblood of their school, they'll proudly admit this is from the processed food industry. In the past 2 years, there's been 50,000 peer-reviewed research studies on nutrition. We're the only animal that has peer-reviewed nutrition studies, and we're the only animals that are systematically obese, diabetic, and being crippled by metabolic dysfunction.
Is he making his case for you at all? Maybe just a little bit.
Oh, no,
he refers to us as animals. There's a little worldview problem.
I
yeah.
get the point he's making, though.
Yeah. Well, I would say certainly the incentivizing the prices. I still just want to see the receipts on the addiction stuff. But I think it's absolutely true that you have all that money pouring in from, a bunch of it's pouring in from the government, and then you got these big pharma, big food companies pouring money to get studies,
to get the research to say what they want it to say.
But it's like that. There's perverse incentives built into all of that, and you don't have a lot of objective information, intel.
Yeah,
and I think there's certain kinds of studies you want to get people to get the heart on the cereal box kind of thing, and money driving all that. And I would just say, there's no way to trust that. And I go back again to COVID. I go back to Fauci. I go back to what the NIH and the CDC did during COVID, and it's like, again, perverse incentives.
Yeah.
So the same
and the
thing,
control of information.
And control of
Right.
information.
In med school.
Yeah, that's
Right?
exactly
That's
right.
where doctors are being taught.
And so you've got Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who says, I got some questions, and they're just shouting him down.
Yeah. And you got to remember, even Jay was slow to come to this way. He was
just like, I just got some questions.
I just got a few questions.
Like, shut up.
Yeah. And then he went cold-blooded killer.
He was suspended on Twitter.
Yeah, that's right. He got suspended on Twitter.
And don't forget the same thing that big food. So you brought up that 1940s issue with wheat. They're doing the same thing with the cow industry.
Yeah.
Right there. You can't process your own meat on your own dairy farm.
Right. Well, we had that other
the
guy.
Brazil, remember?
No, the guy from Pennsylvania. What's the guy from Pennsylvania? Remember?
Yeah.
They came and
the bison. Was it bison?
They raided his farm.
We had the reporter on, Chris.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chris. I forgot your last name. You're a good brother.
Nobody can remember names today.
I know. No. But this farmer in Pennsylvania, he's an Amish farmer, and he doesn't do any of the FDA checks. He doesn't have the FDA come into his farm. He does all kind of natural processed food. He does his own cheese, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And we also had the Mount Athos guy on, and they're regulated.
Yeah.
He couldn't use he right now, although the Chevron decision might change this. The FDA was squeezing him using his goat's milk for children.
Right. The thing. So freedom of speech, first of all, it's a First Amendment, and it's something I think is like we need more protections.
Mm-hmm.
People ought to be free to do the study, put the research out there. It might not be good, it might be bad research, but but right now what you have is the government controlling that flow of information in a lot of ways, and that's not good for us.
No.
And then secondarily, I think what we want is Christians want truly free markets, and
that's the only way.
Truly free markets. Now, with that means that, are you going to get some guy that's got bad milk? Are you going to get some guy that sells something that's not good?
Yeah.
Yes,
but we have that now.
We have that
on a mass scale. It's now on a mass scale.
Yes. Exactly.
When you get E. coli in your food, that's coming on a mass scale from a farm in California.
Exactly.
Right.
But what you want is the free market, though, solves for this over time.
Yeah.
Because you get to know your farmers, you get to know these companies who make the food, and if they make good food and they also have high hygienic practices and
how they treat their cows, their chickens,
they're being careful with that kind of thing, then you buy it, you trust them, and then you build economies of trust with people or at least companies that have a good reputation. This is why you go buy something on the marketplace, Amazon or something like this, or eBay, and you see somebody with 2 reviews and it's 2.5 stars, and you're like, I don't know, I don't think so. But the guys with 1,000 5-star reviews, you think, okay, and you read the reviews, and it's like that's the free market at work.
Sure.
Giving you feedback, and it incentivizes those sellers to do a good job, and a lot of them follow up. Can you, if you were happy, would you please give me a good review? Because that matters.
Yeah.
But that's the free market in action, and that's what we need in food. That's what we ought to have in pharmaceuticals. Is what we ought to have in speech.
So I know, Toby, you're definitely wanting to see more of a connection on this.
I just love cigarettes. So
yeah, yeah.
The connection on what? The addictions stuff?
No, not the addiction stuff. I would just what my point here is like, we have to be honest about kind of the state of health in America.
Right.
I'm like I was like obesity. If you were fat back in the 20s, you're on the circus route. You know, you're doing the circus thing, right? And you obviously there's old pictures and videos of people walking around New York and skinny and all that stuff, or healthier bodies that seemingly than that. But now, like obesity rates in kids are something like what 50% now.
Really high.
Like
in kids,
the heaviness in kids
and diabetes
all of it.
Everybody has a blood sugar problem
and cancer.
Everybody, insulin resistance. I mean, it's like 80% of the population.
Well, they're saying like type 2 diabetes,
PCOS in women.
PCOS is a huge problem,
and they're saying dementia is actually type 3 diabetes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. That's what. That's what they said. They said that in the interview.
And there's a whole book on it. There's a whole book on it.
Yeah.
They said
there's a lot of books on it.
Yeah.
I just found out there was one book.
There's a book
There's a whole book
on dementia.
Oh my gosh!
What? Yeah.
Right.
So there's a lot
I
to talk about it.
I think whatever's going on, I think there's actually a spiritual aspect to it. God judges. When God judges, He judges food. He judges lands.
Yeah.
Right. But
it's in Deuteronomy.
Yeah. So I don't have I don't want to just make this a purely mechanical food in, food out situation.
Right.
But I think there's a massive correlation that we cannot ignore. Between our food and what's happened in the United States, the socialist connection between the government and then of course all the incentives. The government's been funding canola oil and been funding, corn, converting corn into oil. And
again, if somebody wants to do that, I think it should be a free country. People should try to do that.
Yeah.
The thing that I hate is the government doing that.
That's right.
And then
subsidizing it, you mean?
And subsidizing it and then superficially pushing down prices and creating again perverse incentives.
Yeah, and they're telling you it's good for you.
Right.
Yeah, right.
That's the other side.
Right.
Of it.
And I don't mind a private company trying that. And if they think it's good, they can advertise and say it's good. But I want it to actually function in a truly free market where people can see for themselves, try for themselves.
Yeah.
A company's free to advertise, but as soon as the government gets in and says, no, this is really good for you, they're putting their finger on the scale.
And we made a pyramid to show you how good it is for you.
Right.
Yeah.
You think of I've talked a lot with Annie about seed oils. You should just real quick, you should talk about how seed oils are made and what it goes through to get to the process to where it becomes an oil.
Sure. I mean, for the record, jury's still out for me, honestly. I mean, just because everybody in the health space, and it's not everybody actually, but just because a bunch of people are like seed oils are the devil, that doesn't make it true.
Right.
And we believed as a large groups of people believed a lot of things over history. Then it's like, oh, actually, the Earth isn't flat. I mean, it happens all the time.
Right.
So I don't.
Cigarettes are good for you.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, like the pregnant
cigars
women,
are. There's a study.
They were recommended by doctors. Pregnant women.
I know
were
back
like
in the day.
smoking.
I know cigarettes.
And it wasn't that
we
long
got those
ago.
ads. We had on water break.
The Surgeon General
The
was like recommending cigarettes.
And I think well-meaning doctors were. You know what I mean? I don't think they were
it's
like
good for digestion.
Well, yeah, you see those ads with your favorite doctor uses Marlboro.
Yeah.
Virginia Slims or whatever.
Virginia Slim. Yeah, exactly. So I just want to say the jury is still out for me in terms of just how bad I think they are. At this point, though, with what I know, I don't think they're healthy. I try to keep them out of my diet, my family's diet as best I can. I'm not like crazy about it, but I try to mostly keep it out of our diet. And it's in terms of the advice I give people right now, when they ask me, I say avoid them. And that's just for several reasons.
Is that because of how they're made, or because of you think that God made the oil and the seeds just not good for us?
That's a great question. It's a little bit of both. I mean, it's how they're made is a huge problem. At least the industrial seed oils that we're talking about, which is this very, very cheaply, made, in big factories,
canola oil,
corn, canola, cottonseed, all of those. Okay. I mean, they really, as far as I've read, came on especially I think soybean and cottonseed came on the market for human consumption at like late 1800s. Mm-hmm. And before that they were around, but they were like tractor oil and like machine oil, light, like lamp oil. And then someone came up with the idea that we could eat this and it's really cheap, cheaper than butter, tallow,
olive oil.
Well, I mean, all those are expensive. They're more labor intensive. They're animal products, or I mean, olive oil is just,
and people should be free to try it.
I think so. I mean, it's kind of gross.
It's not immoral.
But what I wanted you to illustrate here is like how the seed oils, they had to go through when they're first made, they stink.
Yeah,
and they have to go through like this purification process to strip the smells out of it.
Yeah, so to answer your question, Toby, part of my issue with them is just how much of the average American diet is made up of them, because it's actually, so these seed oils are omega-6, so they get called PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids. Very high in linoleic acid in particular. The body actually doesn't need them, and we need omega-3s, we need omega-6s, but according to at least the experts that I trust, not in that amount.
Yeah.
So some of it is just we're just getting too much.
Sure.
I think we went from like a few grams a day at about 1900 in the average American's diet to like about 80, which is
of seed oils, 80 grams of seed oils
a day.
Wow.
But again, that's when you're eating mostly processed food.
Yeah.
Or fast food. That's how you're getting all that, and that's a lot. That's like 30% of your daily calories. Which is a huge amount. And so that's part of my problem. And the other problem is how they're processed. And YouTube it sometime, you guys watch a nice little YouTube video, because you will feel like you're in one of those Sesame Street bits where they take you to the factory and like they're making some sort of engine oil, but it's actually oil for human consumption, and it's horrifying.
Can you give a short version?
Yeah. I mean, basically they have to refine it using a bunch of chemicals, hexane being one of them, and a bunch of things that are considered toxic. I mean, by any standard. Then they have to be bleached. Then at that point they do stink to high heaven. So they have to be deodorized. So that right there is a huge turnoff to me, especially in terms of something that I would want to be consuming a lot of. And beyond that, it's hard with food studies with people, because there are a bunch of like actual human trials comparing basically animal fats to these seed oils. But a lot of them are really sloppily done. I actually just listened to a podcast the other day with Paul Saladino going through probably the most popular 10. And he just went through one after the other. And he was like, well, in this one, the control trial, they saw this, but they were also eating a bunch of trans fats. Okay. And in this one, in this experimental.
It's not a pure randomized control
and
test.
Like they were all smoking, or they were all, you know what I mean? And and a lot of these were done like in the 60s. This conversation's been around for a long time. Because again, there's a lot of money to be made there. So it's a little sketchy, but just because you can make money on something doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad for you. Right. So anyways, I don't know that answer.
I usually have a glass of canola oil every night. Are you saying that's bad for me?
You probably got to get up in the middle of the night.
You guys, if you learn from out of the 90s, even now, a lot of nutritionists, a lot of like nutrition classes at school, they will literally tell you like basically that is a good idea. It lowers cholesterol. It's good for you.
Mm-hmm.
But again, human studies are really, really hard, because you can't, unless you lock them in a facility and you control every single thing, how they're sleeping. Are you smoking? Are you also eating trans fats? It really muddles things. But I will say, probably the best, and I can give anybody a link to that Paul Saladino episode if you guys want it. And it's just interesting because he literally by name goes through every single study, and he out of the 10, the human randomized controlled trials, he was like, probably 2 of these are legit.
Well, I'm totally at the point where, like, given what the government started doing all the way back in the 1930s, 1940s, in trying to be our mom.
Yes.
Basically,
nanny.
The nanny state. I'm at the point where it's like I don't trust much of any of that,
and you shouldn't.
So it's I don't know what the answer is. But I also think but there is. I mean, I think anecdotally, it's certainly true. Like all the diabetes,
we got to keep more cancer, all the stuff.
All the obesity, all that stuff, and it's like, that's something. And
it's correlative.
Yes.
And an author who's really good on that is Chris Knobe. I cannot remember the name of his book, but one of his biggest messages is if you actually, just look at the trends of obesity in America, which is pretty undeniable and not that hard to kind of chart. He makes the point that our increased consumption of seed oils, which again, from almost nothing in 1900 to 80 grams a day by 2010, matches up perfectly with the obesity rate. And it matches up way better than carbohydrate consumption and even sugar consumption, which a lot of people don't like. But it's true.
The seed oil thing.
Seed oil thing.
More than sugar.
Yes.
Okay.
Which a lot of people get really mad about. I'm not sitting here telling you sugar, you can have as much as you want, it won't affect you, but it's interesting.
Well, here's the thing is that I have no problem. God made food, and it's pretty magical. Like it grows on a tree.
It's actually the first thing he told Adam about.
That's right.
Before the catechism. Before the tree, before anything else, it was like, Adam, you're going to want to know about the menu.
The food. Exactly.
Food.
So I have no problem. God making food, and then man doing cool things with it.
That's called priestlyhood. That's part of priestlyhood.
Priestlyhood.
And so,
priestlyhood.
penicillin's great. It's like there's things that man have been able to do with God's world, God's creation, that has turned out for great good.
Right.
And then of course, God also made marijuana and weed, and drugs. And so there's things that God made.
Mushrooms,
that is like, okay,
some of them you should eat, some of them you should not.
I don't think we should process that in our food, kind of thing.
Well, another show.
Another show.
We're gonna go there.
But I would say, I think I think some of the logic here about like seed oils and some of the kind of engineering of our food, and again, some of the engineering of our food has helped feed hungry people, and also fight locusts and bad things and that's going out in the field.
Disease.
But also some of that engineering kind of ends up in our tummies.
Right.
So I think some of the logic here is that like we've basically in a lot of ways put a lot of chemicals and toxins into our food, and then our body over and now we're processing like 80 grams versus 0 grams. And our bodies are now kind of trying to process some of these harder things to process. Like olive oil is easier to process than seed oils. That's just a fact, right, baby?
Well, I mean, that's one of the biggest arguments. Kate Shanahan's probably one of the most notable doctors and researchers on this particular topic. But her argument is that these are more damaging to your cells and to your long-term health than sugar or cigarettes, simply because these sorts of this kind of linoleic acid
it's just harder to process.
It gets in your fat cells and it stays there. As opposed to just sugar, you can burn through that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
that's just getting up and walking and working
exactly.
out. Yeah.
So she's like, I mean, sugar can get you eventually if you never move and you eat so much of it. But she's like, this sits in your fat and it just wreaks a lot of
and even the way we're
damage.
Processing sugar right now, some of it you can't even work off. So they're doing the same thing to sugars in a lot of ways. And
this whole conversation reminds me of the guy, what's his name? The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels.
Oh,
Alex
Epstein.
Yeah.
He not a Christian guy as far as I know.
No, I think he's an atheist.
But he
or Gnostic might be.
But argues strenuously for the good of fossil fuels.
That's right.
And one of the helpful things that he does is that he has traced the development of it. And early on, when you're first, like coal, coal is creating all kinds of smoke, smog. It's not, it's like people get coal lung, like there's all kinds of health things. But he points out, but it was a relative improvement from not having coal. Before coal and you just had wood fire, people were dying all the time because they didn't have heat.
It wasn't a strong source of heat.
So you add coal. Coal is a better source of heat. People start having longer lifetimes. Now there's health problems that come with coal, but because they have longer lifetimes, better health, they're able to work on the coal and they start refining it better. And then you get a kind of oil.
And then they wore a mask.
And then well, maybe, but he points at like the history. The environmentalists freeze everything and say, if you do this, multiply it times 1,000 or 1,000,000, everyone's dead in 10 years. The oceans are going to rise and the sun's going to go black and, global everything. Well, Epstein says, well, here's the thing, like in a free market, when people are free to innovate, they naturally want to improve their products. They create a good product. It has a relative improvement. And if it's relatively improved, it relatively improves quality of life. People keep it, but then you want to keep improving quality of life. And I think it's the same thing. It's like even gas, for example, now, the way it's refined that we use in our vehicles is far cleaner than it was decades ago. And we're using far more parts of petroleum for all kinds of other cool things because of that refining process.
That's right.
Priestly duties.
Exactly. And so I just want to say that the same thing about food technology is like, I think we should be free. And especially if you're in the early, late 1800s or whatever, and you're just trying to figure out like, I just don't want insects eating everything. And they come up with some kind of pesticide or they come up with some kind of chemical to harvest something like, and it works. And it's not immediately killing anybody, whatever, but there's a relative improvement. I would say that's a step in the right direction. But then what you don't want is the government getting involved in that and now starting to regulate it. And because that slows everything down, it discourages innovation because you don't know if what you're going to do is going to get shut down by the government next week. Whereas if you have a free market, you experiment, you try new things out. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good, but it relatively improves things over time. And I would say there's always trade-offs. And we don't, you don't want to think in terms of, you don't want to have zero-sum thinking on this. And so there may have been real relative good gains over the course of the 20th century in terms of some of our nutrition, health, so on, while the government's getting their hooks in it and beginning to distort that.
Yeah, I think also too, though, everything we do, we need to do in faith.
Yes.
And obedience to God. And when you don't do that and you try and then use your priestly duties to fight against the curses of God because you're not being obedient, don't expect there to be a benefit to you in this.
That's witchcraft.
Right. That's witchcraft. And so just, as we're having this conversation, as a filmmaker, I get to go and pretend I'm a doctor, or I get to go and pretend that I'm a researcher because I get to hang out with those guys and learn everything they learn and tell their story.
That you're white.
Have that one doesn't usually work. But anyway, I get to learn. Oh, by the way, was that book called The Ancestral Diet Revolution?
Yes.
How vegetable oils and processed
Kenobi.
food.
Yeah, he's pretty good. And then also Kate Shanahan, who I mentioned, she has a book called Dark Calories.
Knobbe, everyone.
Yeah.
If you're looking for that book.
I think I'm saying his last name right. But that Dark Calories is another good book.
But one of the things that I was working with some guys who were doing wheat. And they were farming wheat and planting wheat. And I was asking them.
Oh, this is our elder, Jeremy Bunch.
Elder. And so and they were going through and they were separating the wheat and doing this weird thing. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he says, well, right now, every crop that we had, if we kept the same lineup, it would all die off. The same seeds, they would die off because of the pestilence, and it would come and it would take the whole crop, and we lose tons of money. So every year, and now it's even getting faster than that, we have to create a whole new type of seed.
Genetics.
Yes, and synthetic, and do all sorts of different types of things to fight off the current pestilence. And the pestilence comes back, and so then we have to
vaccination,
re-engineer the whole thing all over again. And as he's talking, all I'm seeing is Pharaoh's witch doctors and it's trying their very best to fix,
why Pharaoh's witch doctors?
Well, because I'm thinking of like the curse, right? Like you're not going to get out of this. You're going to let God's people go, or you're going to be cursed in it. And so like they're trying to change the blood back to regular water, or again.
But why can't that work be actually true priestliness?
Well, because I think when you have a blood-soaked land that we have from abortion and a lot of other things, I don't think you're going to get away from this.
Yeah.
I think that you can try and do a lot of things. I mean, you think about,
because I'm all about the genetic engineering of wheat. And
I don't have a certain problem with that, but you're not going to be able to use that to get out of the curses.
Sure.
But I think that we're trying.
But a bunch of those farmers are Christians.
Yeah, but yes, some of them are. I don't think a lot of them are.
Yeah.
A lot of them are just, and I think you have good people who are doctors and good people who are inside of the industry that are Christians too, and they don't always recognize that they're dealing with a curse. And a curse of language and communication. Well, there is a huge separation from the doctors and the food industry,
and yet babble going on,
and nobody can communicate. That's not that. How? Why? The clip we were going to play. Can we play the next clip with I think it's Callie talking about the disconnectedness, the division in care.
More specialized you get, the more prestigious you get, and what this does is it creates a system in which we actually start to see the body as 100 different separate parts, and we lose sight of how all of these things are connected. We lose sight of the research that's telling us how all these diseases are connected, that the diabetes that's happening all over your body, actually, we know that type 2 diabetes greatly increases our risk for hearing loss. But a neurologist doesn't really want to think about that. They want to operate on the ear, right? And so you lose sight of the connections, and you get a patient in 15 different specialist offices. So many Americans are going through this right now, where you go to the primary care doctor with 10 issues and you end up with 10 different referrals to different specialists. And no one has any education, time, or financial incentive to think about how all those diseases are related.
This is a direct result of taking God out of your medical education system. Yeah. They said
out of education.
Yeah, out of education, but particularly
education.
About medical education, because you aren't heart, soul, and mind in a government medical school. You are not heart, soul, and mind.
Right.
The other thing that they quoted earlier in the interview, or sometime in the interviews, is they said something like 90% of government medical programs, the doctors don't even have a required health class.
Nutrition class.
And
he included Stanford and Harvard.
Stanford, Harvard.
And this is
that's like core to your health.
And part of the point that I want to drive home is that you can have one thing that is a blessing and another thing, because you're not honoring God. The posture and the story matters.
Right.
So you have the speared serpent, right? that was put right with the ark, right? Everything was supposed to be right there with the ark. Was it put in the ark? I think it was. I can't remember the exact narrative. Anyway, that spear serpent that Moses,
not in the ark, but it was near there. It was still around by the time of Hezekiah.
But what happened when they started worshiping it, and it was like, it's time to go. Yeah. That thing has to go. And so that one thing that it all is the narrative and what you're doing in the narrative, and that tells you kind of like, so you're a priest, you're supposed to be doing these things, but what is your posture before God? We were just talking yesterday to Megan. And we were lamenting the fact that all these things that are going on right now are all the narratives that Christians have forgot God has said something about.
Right.
All the things that we're getting compromised in, God has given his word so that we can be instructed on how to engage with this. And we have intentionally said, no, Lord.
Right.
No, Lord. And now we're getting an onslaught from the secularists who are buying off the fringe of us. And some of the good guys are getting compromised because we've said no, Lord, to this. And we are not going to be able to escape this that way. Now, there's always light in Goshen. Thank God his world still works a particular type of way. Right. But especially on this level, you got communism that comes inside of our systems and destroys it. You have the education system that can't talk to each other, even though they're studying the same doggone building. And the most elite of us is the most ignorant because we specialize without fellowship and communication.
Right.
And the Pastor Doug has said this so much about education. Education is the university, right? But now we've been so fragmented.
Right.
The things that are supposed to instruct us in how we teach human beings, raise human beings, create free people are now creating us to be slaves because they're not unified in Christ.
Right. This is the end result of polytheism.
Yes.
So when you functionally live, so that's what pluralism worships. Pluralism, when they multiculturalism, pluralism, when it says that worship whatever God you want, put whatever your favorite God in the pantheon. This is what you get.
Yes.
At best, you get a bunch of specialists who can't talk to each other.
Yeah. Right.
That's right.
And there's no unity. Back to your point about the university. That's why the Trinity is actually so foundational. It's one and many.
Yeah.
I love the fact that we live in a world that can have specialists.
Yes, absolutely.
But I also want people that are generalists.
Yeah.
I want a general doctor who knows about nutrition, who knows how these things are connected, and I want specialists that I can be referred to if I need it.
They're going to do surgery on the heart. That's all they know how to do surgery.
Exactly.
It's just the heart.
Yeah. So thankful for the specialists. Yeah. But the curse is that they can't talk to each other. The curse is that we don't have people that are studying the general and the way that everything's connected.
I think part of it too has been, if you look at the way that we do exegesis, theologically, what we love to do is grammatical historical separations where we lay the body out on the table.
Specialist exegesis.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And we split it all up and we separate it from the whole, and then we focus primarily on the shoulder.
Right.
And that's the most important part.
Right.
And we have no idea how the rest of it is connected. And I think what's going on with Shepherds for Sale, the health industry, these aren't look
connected.
These this whole God's world is made to function on righteousness. And when you don't function that way,
I think Pastor Doug has quoted Francis Schaeffer a number of times. He said that, and this is like Francis Schaeffer talking probably like in the 70s. So the problem with the modern evangelicals is that they only think in parts.
That's right.
They only think in parts and not in wholes. Which is part of the fact that you've had a resurgence of what worldview thinking, like that whole idea of
all of Christ for all of life,
worldview. That's the point. That was like we need to be generalists with Christ at the center. We need to.
Well, he gave you the world.
Yeah, we need to know the world. Now, there's a place for specialization, and there's a real gift in specialization, but it's a real curse if everyone's a specialist.
Yeah, I mean,
and this is what happened during COVID again.
Yeah,
during COVID, it was like, well, trust the experts.
Yep.
Trust the experts. I'm not an expert. There's a virologist.
But there's also this idea. Well, I'll never need to learn math because I'm never going to use it so I'm not going to be a rocket scientist. So I'm never going to. And it's like, no, it develops the muscle for what you are going to be able to use, and it helps you understand God's world in a more robust way. So even to get to NSA has the hardest problem getting people to say, why do I need to go and get one of these educations? What am I going to do with it?
Why do I have to, read literature, music?
Why do I need to do that? And it's like, because you're understanding how God's world works and in understanding that you become a specialist because you have such a robust, copious understanding of the world.
Right.
Well, we've crucified that idea. Oh, there's a connection there. Right? Yeah. So that we think if we can just find the pinpoints and go to there, then we'll be okay.
Right.
But it's killing us in so many different ways.
Well, for our audience who's listening, I think you don't want to miss part of the trick, part of the play here is we kind of get caught on the science of it,
right,
of what's going on, carbs in, carbs
Because
out,
it's the
whatever.
outworking of it.
Yeah.
Right.
But you can't, and this is the medical industrial complex problem. This is the government problem, that you strip Christ out of our government. You strip Christ out of our education system.
This is our border problem. This is
Kelly's problem too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's right. Because he's probably fine with the cigarette regulations or whatever.
Well, no, but I mean, even their talk about good energy.
Mm-hmm.
They still want the solution.
It's a disconnected.
They want the solution to be the right food.
Yeah.
Right.
And
right.
You could get the perfect food. First of all, you can't get the perfect food because we live in a fallen world.
It's very hard.
You cannot. Okay. All the food is infected with the fall.
Yeah.
All of it is to some extent. Now, I'm not saying I'm not a relativist. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I think there's better food and worse food.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you had the very best food you could possibly get in a fallen world, it wouldn't fix it.
Yeah.
Some of you would still get diabetes. Some of you would still get dementia.
Yeah.
And maybe it would be
some of you
less.
still get cancer
because you can't have God's blessing without God.
That's 100%
You
right.
cannot have God's blessing without
point.
God.
I want to illustrate one illustration, then we can go to Psalms here. I want to illustrate your point this way. So we've talked about obesity rates are higher, and you can kind of basically see that through history pictures in the United States. Cancer's higher, whatever, diabetes is up, all this stuff. God has given us so much here in America.
Right.
I mean, our food supply is so crazy abundant.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add, we've talked about this on Water Break before, but I want to make a different point here. But then you add refrigerators.
Yeah.
I mean, we're the first, society ever to have food
and
24/7
and DoorDash
and all this stuff. I mean, God has blessed us so much here in America, but it's actually turning out not for our own blessing,
for our cursing,
for our own cursing,
which is exactly what God did with the people in the wilderness when they complained.
Right.
Yeah.
He said, I'm gonna make the quail come out their noses,
And they died.
and they died.
Yeah.
God can withhold food and kill you, or He can give you way more food than you need.
Yep. So
and it can kill you.
We're so blessed in our country, but that blessing is starting to turn out for our cursing. And so you cannot miss the heart, the soul, the mind of everything that God's doing in our food and in our nation right now. So don't miss that.
All right, Psalm 124.
Oh, it's Beer and Psalm Wednesday.
You wanna crack one open for us?
I'll crack one open.
This has maybe this has something to do with what we talked about. I totally forgot what we were talking about when I was
Psalm 124
preparing this. I know what it is, but I don't know if it ties into Big Pharma and big food.
We'll tie it in.
Tie it in.
All right, I'm gonna try. Psalm 124. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, now may Israel say, if it had not been the Lord who was on our side, when men rose up against us, when they had swallowed us up quick, when their wrath was kindled against us, then the waters had overwhelmed us, the stream had gone over our soul. Then the proud waters had gone over our soul. Blessed be the Lord, who hath not given us as a prey to their teeth. Our soul has escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowler's net. The snare is broken, and we are escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. This is a psalm of praise for deliverance. The psalm acknowledges that it was the Lord being on our side that delivered us. When men rose up against us, think Big Pharma, think the NIH, think
you tied it in.
Big government. We would have been swallowed up alive. The waters would have overwhelmed us. Their proud schemes and wrath would have consumed us. The praise is, blessed be the Lord, who did not give us as a prey to their teeth, likening enemies to a predatory animal. The picture of escape is vividly described as a bird escaping the snare of hunters. The snare was broken, and we have escaped. And the psalm closes with the exuberant line, our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. Psalms like this are given to us because God's people frequently have been hunted over the centuries. On the one hand, this is a reminder not to be surprised by the schemes of evil men. Sing a psalm like this, it reminds you, we are God's people. We are going to be hunted. There are going to be evil people who hunt us. Whether these are singular schemes of particular enemies or the coordinated attacks of powerful regimes, we must not be surprised. They hate God. They hate His Christ. And so they hate us. They hate the truth. They hate the light. They seek to destroy it. And they seek to destroy it by destroying us. So don't be surprised when enemies rise up against you at work, in your family, in the church, in your community, or in our nation. There's plenty of them. That's why we sing psalms like this. In fact, Jesus says that you should be really worried if everyone speaks well of you all the time. Of course, you may not be a belligerent jerk. You must always be willing to admit when you actually are wrong and when you have sinned. And the people closest to you should laugh at the thought of you being too proud to apologize, right? People accuse you. You always think you're right. You never apologize. The people closest to you should laugh at that. They should think that's hilarious. But when you've double checked that, you should not be shocked when you have enemies and you know what to do with them. Love them, do good to them, pray for them, and then trust God to protect you and deliver you from them. Romans 8 says that if God is for us, who can be against us? And of course, what it means is, who can stand against us? Nobody. People certainly can rise up against us, oppose us, seek to undermine our churches, our businesses, our families. But if God is on our side, he will rise up and he will defend us. We know this because he has done so in the cross. He who did not spare his own son, how will he leave us as a prey to be consumed by wicked men? How will he not with him give us all things? And this is why Romans 8 closes with that triumphant declaration that in all these things, and these things are persecution, famine, nakedness, sword, being killed all day long by cereal. In all of these things,
seed oils, tied it in again.
In all these things, we are more than conquerors. So as you see enemies, see opportunities for God to be on your side, to rise up and defend you and your family, your business, your church, and the truth. And when he does, you better notice and you better burst out with this song. Blessed be the Lord who has not given us as prey to their teeth. Our help is in the name of the Lord, maker of heaven and earth.
Didn't Doug, I think it was Doug who quoted this psalm saying it was one of the war songs that Israel would walk out to battle with. I think it was Doug that said
Is that why I always want to fight when I hear
it's
this
one of the
song?
songs that they would sing when they'd walk out to battle.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, if you're single, get married. If you're married, have you some kids. And if you have kids, go baptize them. Until tomorrow, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast.
Cheers.
This is Cross Politic. Cheers to the kids, brothers.
There's no seed oils in this, is there?
I really hope, probably not.
A lot of wheat.
I hope there's a lot of seed.
You can have as much as you want.
The American church really is gay.
Are you asking me out on a date?
Effeminate.
The Bible appears more to whisper when it comes to sexual sin.
Shallow.
I said, I want the African American 7.
And full of cowardly leaders.
Are we going to keep bickering over secondary issues?
America desperately needs to return to the Father. Either we fall on the rock and are broken, or we fall on the ground and are crushed under that rock. To fall on top of the rock and be broken is exactly the condition in which God brings reformation and revival. So which way is it, Prodigal America? Are you coming home to the Father? Join us this Reformation Day in Fort Worth, Texas, October 31st through November 2nd at Will Rogers Event Center, just days before our presidential election. And join with the thousands of us for the blessing of gathering together with God's people and celebrating God's goodness with beer and psalms. Hear from speakers such as Dr. James White, Pastor Toby Sumter, Pastor Doug Wilson, Dr. George Grant, Gabe and Knox, Steve Dace, and more. Don't forget our Business Makers Conference, Jumpy Castles for the kiddos, after parties, single events, the Pastor's Luncheon, the Business Leaders Luncheon, and many more surprises coming. America has squandered her inheritance far too long. It's time she repents and returns home to her Father. Fight, Laugh, Feast presents Prodigal America.